Welcome to the Ag Inspo Podcast, where we delve into the dynamic world of agriculture, uncovering the stories that inspire, empower, and drive change. Join hosts Rena Striegel and Rabou as they explore the journeys of farmers, entrepreneurs, and leaders who are making a difference as they navigate the critical work of transitioning their operation to the next generation. From navigating family dynamics to developing the next generation of ag leaders, we'll bring you the insights and inspiration you need to thrive in today's ever-evolving agricultural landscape. So whether you're a seasoned industry veteran or just starting out, get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered as we learn from best practices and a few colossal failures on the Ag Inspo Podcast.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Ag Inspo Podcast. We're really excited because, as usual, we have another great set of guests today, and we are going to venture into kind of new territory. We are going to be talking potatoes, everyone's absolute favorite food. All of us enjoy it in many, many different ways. And today we are talking to some of the largest potato producers in the United States. We are talking to Heidi and Wendy from Alsum Farms and Produce. So Wendy and Heidi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And of course, we've got our amazing co-host, Rabou, with us again from Wyoming. How are you this morning, Ron?
Hey, I am awesome, and welcome to our podcast this morning from windy Wyoming. And how's everything in Iowa? I was just there 2 days ago.
Yep, it's windy. I think it's windy everywhere right now. I think it's just like perfect spring. The wind is blowing through and bringing us some nice warm weather. And of course, all of our favorite spring birds. My grass is turning green. I have flowers that are popping up in my landscaping. So I'm super excited, even though we did have snow yesterday. So, it's all that beautiful March weather.
My wife mentioned that our tulips were coming up today.
Yes.
Even here on the high plains in Wyoming. And so I told my son, I flew out to Des Moines on Sunday night, and I had to speak in Missouri a couple of days. And I told my son when I left, I said, I bet you the wind's not going to be blowing in Iowa and Missouri when I get there. And I think it was every bit as bad there as it was at home. And so I think it's just that, like you said, it's the spring storms coming in, the snow's coming in, the warm weather's coming in. And I think everyone is ready to be done with winter. So
You're ready.
Cheers to that.
Yes. Yeah. So Wendy and Heidi, why don't you take just a couple of minutes and introduce yourself to the audience? Because I'm so excited to get into what's going on out at your place.
Sure.
Welcome everyone. I'm Wendy Alsum Dykstra. I'm part of the second generation of the Alsum companies. Heidi and I share the role of Chief Operating Officer, overseeing the areas throughout the Alsum companies.
Hi, and I'm Heidi Alsum Randall, Wendy's sister. And like Wendy mentioned, we're in our second generation. I oversee our operations, our HR, our sales, purchasing, and kind of all those different areas of the company. Also, some of our warehouse and maintenance functions.
Yeah, I think that's something to say is that Alsum companies have a lot of fingers going in a lot of directions. So maybe talk about the different divisions of Alsum companies that you oversee, and maybe tell us where in the country are you located?
Sure.
Alsum Farms and Produce is a vertically integrated grower, packer, shipper. Alsum Farms and Produce is our packaging and marketing operation. We have Alsum Transport, which is our logistics division. We have a fleet of 30 trucks and over 100 trailers, providing for our needs, our shipping needs. Alsum Farms is our farming entity. We are a potato grower as well as a pumpkin grower, and we do grow some of our rotational acres as well. We are located in somewhat south central Wisconsin. We're about an hour from Madison. Our packing shed is nestled outside of the tiny town of Friesland, Wisconsin, population of 303. Our farms, we farm in both the Rena Spring Green area and the Grand Marsh Adams area as well. In total, we're over 3,000 acres that we farm.
Yeah, and a little bit of our company history. We were started in 1973 by my dad's third cousin and best friend, Glenn Alsum, and we were just a pickup truck operation. So he would peddle 100-pound sacks of potatoes, bring them down to his small little Quonset hut where he and his mom and dad and sisters would repack into 5 to 10-pound bags. Then he would take that truck down to Madison and sell them to local grocers as well as to food service operations. Tragically, in 1981, he was killed in a plane crash while going to look at potato packaging equipment, he and his dad. And so at that time, Glenn's widow, Linda, had asked my dad, who had been doing the books, my dad's a CPA background, as well as Wendy, if he would be willing to help manage the business with her. And so he had been wrestling with staying in public accounting or making a career change. And so at that time, he really, thought about it and decided to come back and help Linda. And so they operated a company together for 4 years before she had met someone, wanted to get remarried and start a family. And so at that time, my dad bought out her entity or her share of the business. And then I guess the year before that, we had started our trucking division. So it was 84, 85 is when he bought her out. And then in 89 is when we started our hand at farming, where we just decided we're going to start with 700 acres. And now we've, like Wendy said, grown to over 3,000 acres of fresh market potatoes. We've been very blessed along the way to do we wanted that calculated growth, but at times we've grown a little faster even than what we planned, but the opportunities to buy more land and so forth. In 2020, we got into pumpkin farming because we had a husband-wife team that were looking to continue in farming, but their operation had ceased operations. And so we took them on, and we look to continue to look for ways to diversify, but we've been very blessed with a lot of great employees that are long-term with us.
Yeah, I think that's really a cool start. I always love to hear the stories where, we started with one pickup, or we started like in this really, really small way. And then just through relationships and hard work, a company in just, one generation or maybe a generation and a half has been able to expand so exponentially. What do you think are some of the key things that have allowed Alsum companies to be able to do that?
I think a big part of it is the people. My dad has kind of been that visionary, the entrepreneur, always asking questions, always looking to make improvements and learn from others, collaborate with others in the industry. So he's been a big part of it, but he would give credit to an incredible group of employees. As you mentioned, we're a small, tight-knit community. We're really a family-friendly company. So it's the hard work and dedication of our entire team that's really supported the growth and success of the Alsum companies over the years.
Yeah, and my dad has really been, like Wendy said, a visionary. I mean, I can tell you, he went to so many of our sporting events as kids, which I really appreciate, but you look back and wonder how he did it all, because he also spent a lot of time at work, just, doing the grind and working as entrepreneurs do to build that business. And so I just give my parents a lot of credit. They worked really well together as a team. And like Wendy said, it's definitely the people around him too, because you need that vision, but then you need to surround yourself with really great people, because you can't do it all as an entrepreneur. And so we've been very blessed with a lot of dedicated people that believe in our mission. And, obviously had my dad as a guy who very humble, very, just honest, and he did a lot of business and still does a lot of business just with his handshake, because his word means a lot to people.
And I was going to add, it's not just the employees. Heidi mentioned, we've been incredibly blessed to have many long-term partnerships, both on the customer side and on the grower supplier side. Without those partnerships, we wouldn't be where we are today. Many of our customer and grower relationships go back 30, 40 or more years. Alsum Farms and Produce celebrated 50 years in business back in 2023. And many of the early partnerships still exist with our growers and customers today.
Yeah, because there are a lot of growers in the state that we represent for, and we have since the beginning. They don't care to operate their own packing sheds, but they really want to be involved in the business, and they may be involved in multiple different segments of the business, but it's allowed us an opportunity. About 50% of what we pack are potatoes that we grow. The remaining 50% take a lot of other local family farms, and a lot of those come from the state of Wisconsin, but across the country too, with potatoes from North Dakota, Colorado, and so forth. So been very blessed with a lot of long-term partnerships.
When you talk about long-term partnerships, I think you actually have one employee that has been in the company longer than your dad, I think, right?
That's correct. We used to have two, and one of those employees retired last fall with 45 years. And then we have one more that's still been here longer than my dad. So.
Well, I think it's super fascinating, because when I think of Wisconsin, the first thing that comes to mind is not potatoes. Yep. In fact, I'm pretty sure that wouldn't even come to mind at all, right? So when you mention other growers, okay, so you just said you have other growers from other states, but apparently there's a fair amount of people that are growing potatoes in Wisconsin then, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Wisconsin ranks number 3 in the country, with Idaho and Washington being larger than Wisconsin, but Wisconsin is number 3 in production across the whole country.
And our farm supplies about 50 to 55% of our annual needs for our customers. We supplement with growers in the state of Wisconsin, and then, as Heidi mentioned, across the country, because our customers want and expect a year-round potato supply. And in order to do that with all varieties, we need to supplement and pull from areas across the country.
Well, here's another interesting point that you probably don't know, and I'm sure Rena doesn't know this either, but when back in the day when people moved west and came to Wyoming and they started opening some of the land up for cultivation, one of the big things that they grew in our community where I live are dryland potatoes. And they must have raised those when it actually rained, because it doesn't do that a lot anymore. At least it doesn't seem like it. But then when I was growing up, there was one farmer around here that had irrigated circles that he raised potatoes on. But so there are some potato sellers here, believe it or not. And I think people use that for equipment storage now. But I think our audience, and certainly myself, would be really fascinated to understand, maybe if you could kind of walk us through the what it takes to plant a potato, what it takes to grow one, what it takes to harvest it, and then what that storage process is and how long those last before they go bad for you to ship out.
Sure. So, I mean, we're right in the time frame now where we're starting to bring in seed potatoes from across the country. Some come from Wisconsin, but the planting process starts with taking a potato and cutting it in half or in quarters, and that is planted into the ground. It's a potato that's not had any sprout inhibitors on it, because you want those potatoes to be able to sprout, and that's where you get the offshoot of what becomes the growth of your potatoes. But we start planting anywhere between like April 10th and as late as maybe April 24th one year. So right in that range, and we plant our russets, reds, golds, And then we start with our reds and golds because those are our shorter varieties and those are what we're harvesting first. Our russets are what we harvest a little bit later. And then we plant our creamer or our smaller baby sized potatoes later, like in late May, because those are, again, a shorter lived. You want it to grow smaller. And so those have a shorter time frame. So that planting process, after you plant it, you go through hilling to make the nice potato hills. And then they've got, processes for putting on fertilizer throughout the year. Some of it's 1 or 2 applications, some of it's a lot more. But then, you've got needs to water the potatoes. You mentioned dryland, which they still dryland farm in North Dakota, but most places use irrigation. And we do have soil sensors in the ground that help us monitor that moisture level, so we're not overwatering a crop. And, we're really trying to be as sustainable as possible while still growing a good quality crop. But then that growth happens until we start harvesting reds the end of July. And then gold potatoes usually are about a week later. So usually beginning of August. This is a rough time frame depending on how the crop has grown. And then we start with russets by usually that 3rd week in August, sometimes that 2nd week, depending on the crop year. And then we wrap up reds and gold harvest by early September-ish. And then russets are going through mid to late October. We've been as late as like November 4th. We've been as early as beginning of October. It really just depends on how our harvest season, how well the weather cooperates. We've had years where we can't get in the fields for 2 weeks because it's too hot or it's too wet. But we've also had frost as early October, which is why we really try, and that October 15th is that nice sweet spot. We've invested in more harvesting equipment to try and harvest quicker. We've also tried harvesting like early in the morning or even in the middle of the night some years. It just all depends on Mother Nature and how well that weather cooperates. But then as far as how long a potato lasts, so your reds and golds last a little bit, they have a shorter shelf life. We used to grow a lot of reds, but we've just found that there's other soil types in the state that grow some nicer quality. It grows a deeper hue red, which is what our customers are looking for. That sandy soil, the reds end up being more of a pinkish color. But those reds, we try and, they're harvested end of July. We try and wrap up the reds by, at the latest, like mid-January. And then our golds are a similar time frame. They may go until the end of January or early February before we're looking to pull from North Dakota or Colorado. We have a grower partner there with the golden potatoes. But then russets, you can harvest the end of October or middle of October, and those can be good until when you start harvesting new crop on August 15th to 20th, somewhere in there. Some years you've got a gap of a few weeks where we run out. And so we're pulling from, other states, Illinois, and, sometimes out west. But then other years we end new crop or end old crop, and then the next day start on new crop. So again, it all depends on supply and demand and how well your yields were in a particular year.
Well, I'm envisioning when you're talking about planting potatoes, so apparently you get the whole potato, and is there a process is there a machine or something that cuts those in half? Because I'm envisioning my grandmother with her bag of potatoes, on her knees in the garden as she's making the hill for the potatoes, cutting these potatoes in half, and then taking her spade and then moving, putting it in the ground and moving it forward and dropping that potato in there. But obviously you can't do that on a large scale. So there must be some kind of a machine or something that makes that work so you guys can take those directly to the field. And I'm assuming after they're cut, they probably need to be planted right away.
That is correct. There is equipment. It's a piece of machinery called a seed cutter. So as Heidi mentioned, we'll bring in full loads of seed and cut the seed. There is occasions where we will actually plant whole seed pieces, but ideally when you're cutting seed, you have at least one eye per seed piece. And we put that cut seed into our clean, sanitized storage bins. It's actually best for that seed piece to heal over and sit in storage anywhere from a few days to few weeks before we start planting that seed piece.
And that process is called suberization, where, it's just starting to, like when he said, sit there, heal over before we plant.
Wow.
So yeah, there are growers in your area then that just specifically raise seed potatoes, and are those just small? They're just harvesting them at a younger stage. They're less mature, or is there a specific variety that is specific to just raising only seed potatoes?
There are varieties that are specific for fresh market potatoes. There's varieties that are specific to chip potatoes or processed and French fry potatoes. But in terms of seed, typically those growers are more isolated because you are growing an earlier generation potato. So you want to isolate them from other commercial production acres and limit the risk of any disease transfer. There's a pocket of seed growers in northern Wisconsin that we bring in seed from. There's some growers in North Dakota, Heidi mentioned. There's seed growers in Canada, Montana, various states and areas across the country. We do not, so typically we will purchase seed from a seed grower who's specialized in growing seed potatoes. They will harvest and store seed for us to plant this year.
And in Wisconsin, if you're a commercial grower, all the seed that you plant needs to be certified seed, meaning it's been inspected by an inspector in the state of Wisconsin, or at least inspected elsewhere, so that we're minimizing that risk for diseases and spreading that. And like Wendy said, those seed producers need to be isolated because otherwise there's a lot of risk of disease. You always hear about, quite honestly, late blight in Wisconsin often comes from just a back home garden, that tomato virus that the wind took something and then it infected a commercial grower's seed that was supposed to go to fresh or processed and whatever. And that's what they often, the UW tracks the sources to, is a lot of home gardens.
Oh, wow.
So
is there a particular process that those growers are using to keep those? Because if you have potatoes that you're harvesting that are only good until, say, January or February, and you really need to make sure they're out of storage, but they're harvesting those seed potatoes, I'm assuming at the same time frame, but they have to store those for another year, correct? Before, or almost a year before they're planted. So is there are they putting them in pooled facilities, or how does that work, and how are they able to keep them longer?
They are storing in temperature, humidity controlled storage buildings, similar to what we use on our farm. I would say I'm not an expert in seed potato storage, but they are, like you said, they're harvesting the same time frame, they're putting into storage, and they're pulling from storage earlier, because most of the growers are pulling their seed potatoes in the state of Wisconsin anyway, in March, April, and May for planting. So there is a shorter storage season. Our storage for russets can be kept until July, but they're storing whole seed potatoes as well. And I think it's just variety dependent. So they may produce a variety they know they can keep in storage for the time frame they need to keep it in storage.
Yeah, and they're storing at different temperatures than we are. They're, messing with the humidity a little bit, because where we can use a sprout inhibitor to, have that potato lasting longer in the shelf, a seed producer cannot use a sprout inhibitor, because otherwise you aren't going to be able to grow those eyes that are needed for, but like Wendy said, it's more of a 5 to 6 month shelf life that you're storing versus a 10, 11 month. And so that helps as well. And, they're growing all the different varieties that we need to produce on the commercial end. It's just, they're, changing things in storage to help ensure that there's some years where it doesn't work out perfect for them too. So we all have our different challenges depending on what segment of the potato supply we are. But I would say I would put our Wisconsin seed producers up against any state. They do an excellent job.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I have this great childhood memory of driving the gravel roads out here. And I was in elementary school when this farmer next to us with his irrigated circles was raising potatoes. And you would drive along the road when they were harvesting, and there would be a pile of potatoes or a few potatoes that fell off of the truck. And I just remember being so fired up because, it was like you found a little like bar of gold or something. You'd stop the car and then you'd run out and you'd get the potatoes and then you'd take them home and cook them. And so are there any community organizations that are in your area that go and pick up potatoes in the field, that use them for food pantries or anything like that? I mean, obviously you're going to have some that fall off the wagon, so to speak, right? So is there any of that going on, or how do you deal with that? Or do you just say that's just, it's like us when we're harvesting wheat, you lose some. It doesn't mean that the local bread basket's going to come scoop the wheat off of your field, but I'm just curious how you deal with anything like that, and if there are any organizations that use that for shelters and whatnot.
I would say we do our best to minimize field loss. We have specialized potato harvesters with different size chains to harvest different size potatoes to minimize that loss. But I think the term is called gleaners. So we have gotten requests over the years for various food pantries or organizations to come into the field after and glean what they can.
And we've done that in some years for both our potatoes and our pumpkins, which our pumpkins are just decorative. But, something that's been instilled in Wendy and I for, since the beginning of time is just the importance of giving back what we've been blessed with. And so we work with a lot of both local food pantries as well as food pantries across the country to give them either free potatoes or discounted potatoes, where you just get your cost out of like the packaging side. You're not making any money and you're still allowing them to be able to provide potatoes for, a lot of people. And we kind of have a budget each year, which that budget continues to grow because the requests don't stop coming in. And quite honestly, there's a need. We all see it, and hear about the statistics. So we feel very strongly, as do some of our employees, that it's really important to give back. And actually, as a company, to celebrate our 50th anniversary, I took some employees to an organization that packs dehydrated potatoes and sends it to just third world countries and countries that are experiencing, like hurricane or, earthquake or so forth. So we did that as a group of employees just to try and honor our 50 years and just how important community giving and just honoring, and blessing those that don't have as much as we do.
I think it's really interesting when you talk about equipment, because your industry, like other industries, is experiencing, labor, even though you've got employees that have been long-term, you do have a somewhat labor-intensive business. And I know that there are some things that you are exploring inside your packing shed and farm side as well to bring in, some of the newest innovations. So can you talk a little bit about some of the sort of industry disruptors that are coming in terms of new technology that's being introduced?
Sure. So about 3 years ago, we brought in a piece of equipment called an Oculus that helped us, quite honestly, grade some reds that had we not had that piece of equipment, we would have told some grower partners, like, I'm sorry, we can't run your reds. And so it really helped us, even though the pack outs weren't great, it allowed that machine and the AI learning to say, okay, these are the defects we need to pull out. But we could at least run his potatoes, give him a return, and keep him satisfied and just economically viable to be able to plant next year's crop. So that's been a great thing. We just within the last year put in some spider robots, which they're somewhat like they sound. It's just robots that are picking up to 60 potatoes a minute, and we put 2 in back to back, and those worked really well. A lot of our, labor for something like packing potatoes sometimes needs to be contract labor because we just don't have the local labor channels that we used to have. And so, we're looking at adding more spider robots over the next year or so. And we certainly have a couple of local people, which those people will definitely stay on and be able to help. But the need to hire a different level of employee is definitely becoming evident as we bring on more technology, because then you need to have somebody that's able to tweak it by variety, by day, by different field. We all know how things, one place can look really beautiful and in the same field or the same bin have some areas where it looks like night and day difference. And so that technology is really allowing us to do more with less almost, and that a lot of it has really quick paybacks and it almost needs to, because that technology, about the minute you get it in, they're always working on the next big thing. But we're looking at some equipment to be able to pack bins, more automated, pack RPCs for some customers that want that DRC or reusable container type thing that's 40, 50 pounds, and able to do that without having somebody manually stack it. And then on the farm side,
yeah, I guess I would say our desire as the Alsum companies has always been to be a leader and on the cutting edge of technology. We may or may not be the first, but closely to follow. So we've all the farm, the logistics, and the pack shed have always tried to stay up on the latest and greatest. On the farm side, we have used variable rate irrigation. We have invested in systems that have allowed us to remotely monitor and control our irrigation, our storage buildings. We've invested in cameras that detect different diseases or pests issues in the field and provide images. We are always looking at the latest and greatest technology to improve our quality, our handling of throughout the entire process, from planting to harvest to storage. Your potato handling is extremely important to what quality you get coming out of storage.
Now we're looking at a harvest eye technology that you can either put as you're going into the bin to try and figure out what size profile you might have, or you can also have it in the field and the harvesting equipment to get a better idea of what area and where are you going to store it, what size profile, what's your quality going to look like, and again, help us to better prepare and plan for the different obstacles that you may have, or just know what you have so you can most efficiently run it. So there's just a lot of exciting technology across, like Wendy said, all areas of the company. It's going to keep us all on our toes. And, the next big thing is integrating all of those systems into place, which Wendy and her teams are in the process of doing. And, that'll be a continual process over the next decades.
It's always interesting to listen to producers talk about sort of the challenges that they have just in getting a crop from the field to the consumer. What do you think are some of this generation's challenges that will be there to solve? I mean, obviously, we've got, Ron with his memories of his grandmother in the garden, and how potatoes were grown on a small scale at that time. Now we're talking about large scale production, shipping produce all over the country and even internationally. What do you see as some of the challenges that will be in your way for you to solve in your tenure with this company?
Well, I think some really big things that are going on right now. One thing is we've seen a shift at the customer end to they want nicer, better than standards and so forth. At the same time, they want you to be sustainable and cutting down on your waste. And so that, has got a tension point because they're kind of conflicting. Then you've got the whole social responsibility piece that's becoming really a hot topic. And, we treat our employees, very well. We treat them like family, but there's always, these audits that are out there. So it's just competing. But then while you've got all of that, then you've got the, technology. How do you weave everything in? It's all great. But if you don't have the time to look at that data or use that data to transform into other decisions. So it's challenges, but it's opportunities and the same. None of them scare me, but they're all things that need to be on our radar of, we can't lose sight of the importance of, keeping that quality up while making sure that we're using those off grades for the next best thing. And it's not all going to dehy or not all going to cattle feed, because that's not economically viable for the grower to, as the standards get tougher, you've just got to be able to, so we've got to develop markets in different areas, trade and what goes on there. And, we don't know what's going to happen, but 1 out of every 5 rows of potatoes are exported to another country. And so certainly what happens in the trade atmosphere and realm, while we do some exporting, but not as much as our grower partners out west and even in Colorado. But no matter what, those potatoes are going somewhere. And if we don't have good trading across the globe, it definitely could impact, flood potatoes on the market, which then hurts the cost, and then the return to the growers. So definitely all opportunities, but challenges at the same time.
I think like in Heidi's time involved postgraduate in the business, we've seen a lot of consolidation in the industry as well. And that's both on the grower side and on the customer side. And so you're either getting bigger or you're getting out. And so for the Alsum companies, like Heidi said, our world is so rapidly changing, and it's important and a challenge for us to stay up on the latest and greatest technology and advancements in our industry. But for us to stay relevant, we need to strategically invest and plan for what our growth strategy is going to be, so that we can maintain our customer and grower relationships and look for opportunities as growers maybe decide that they don't want to stay in it for the long term or for the next generation of family farms. It gives us opportunities to grow our farm side, grow our supply side, and continue to support and grow the industry as a whole.
Are there a lot of potatoes that are getting imported into the U.S. from other countries?
There's some on the frozen side that are being imported, but not as much on the fresh side, I would say.
And the dynamics with that are changing as well, because there are a couple of foreign investors that are looking to establish operations in the United States. So Gristo made their announcement earlier this year that they are building a fry processing plant in the state of North Dakota in order to, instead of importing their frozen French fries, they plan to use U.S. potatoes for their fry plant in North Dakota in the future.
I do think that that's interesting, just like that even potatoes has the influence of foreign investors, foreign markets. We do know that Canada produces a lot of potatoes just across the border. How have you felt any tension with our current Canadian border situation that is going to impact you guys this year, or is that really not something that's going to have a big impact on your business?
Well, I mean, we import some seed from there. And so there definitely is the question, like, what's going to happen with the tariff situation. But we used to do a lot more exporting into Canada than what we do. We used to work with a large retailer there, but it was through another customer. So we don't do that anymore. But we're always looking at exporting and expanding our markets, and again, that diversification. So I think we kind of don't know what's going to happen yet at this point. There's a lot of that uncertainty, but it could impact us. But currently we do a little bit of buying from Canada as far as creamer potatoes, but then our seed, we do a little bit as well.
Yeah.
It seems to me like there's this trend in agriculture, and you've touched on it obviously here just a bit ago, but the focus seems to have always been on let's produce more, like volume. It's all about yield. And now I know that on our side with the small grains that we raise, that especially really even in the last year or two, but most especially this year, the focus is a lot more on quality. And so there's a balance that we all have to strike. We have to find in raising volume, but also producing quality while still trying to be sustainable, which we all know just means to be profitable. And so the role that AI is playing in your farm with what you're doing sounds to me like that is going to be a very, very critical component of how you can increase the quality of what you provide for your different suppliers. And that technology, the downside of it is it's fairly expensive, most of it. And so do you think that are we getting to a point now where you found this in your own business because of what you have invested in? Are you finding that the amount of money that you're investing into AI technology is really paying for itself? Or are you just trying to get a head start on some of that to kind of create your own market with higher quality products that you can sell to your buyers?
I would say even going back to ahead of when AI technology came out, the state of Wisconsin developed a program in the early 90s called the Healthy Grown program. They've been a leader in the industry in terms of collaborating with UW professors, a group of farmers, our dad being one of the early founders of the Healthy Grown program, because payback or not, we have felt that it's important to grow our potatoes in the most sustainable way possible, reducing our use of pesticides and inputs, controlling quality, improving soil health, managing our irrigation, maintaining pollinator habitats, and being environmentally friendly to the greatest extent possible. So even ahead of AI and some of that, our industry, the state of Wisconsin have invested in and collaborated with UW professors on figuring out the best practices we all can adopt on our farms to improve our quality while producing our potatoes in the most sustainable way possible. AI has helped to, like, over now the last few years, AI is helping with some of that process. Data and systems, just managing and monitoring what we're doing and taking the results of that every year, analyzing it and continuing to improve our operations. Now, have just continued what we've already been doing the last 20, 25 years, but in a more automated way that has helped to react probably even that much faster.
Yeah, and I would definitely say a lot or all of the AI that we have invested is paid for itself. Like I mentioned earlier, like those red potatoes that we put in that system, and it was just a trial with a supplier, and we couldn't have run those reds without it had we not had that system in place. And so, I mean, that was hundreds of thousands of dollars that we were able to return to a grower because we're able to give them something for their crop. And we had the machine at that point for free, but it convinced us to invest in the machine because it was worthwhile. And, we look for a short payback on a lot of these investments because we know the minute you put it in, it becomes almost out of date because they're constantly working and evolving. But, we've tried to partner with really good suppliers on that end who we feel like in turn they're investing in to make sure their product is top of line. And like we mentioned earlier, trying to integrate all those systems, we feel like we've gotten some good return on investment.
Now that's really excellent. What, as we kind of come to the end of our time together, you two as second generation, what are the things that you're looking forward to? I mean, I know you've got kids that are coming up behind you, and you've got, multi-generational families that have been in your business where dad or mom is in the business and now their kids are in the business. So what are the things that you're looking forward in terms of the next generation of Alsum families that will come behind you?
Yeah, so it's really exciting. My daughters are slightly older than Wendy's, so I've got two in high school and one that's in third grade yet. But, one of my older two has expressed interest in the business, which is super exciting. My other daughter has other career aspirations, which is totally fine too. But it definitely is exciting to think about that next generation being able to get involved. And Wendy's girls maybe don't know what they want to do yet, but we definitely have the opportunity for 4 of our 5 girls to get involved. And even if only 2 or 3 of them, it's still exciting because there's so many different opportunities. My one daughter that is interested, I've tried to encourage her to get, involved in FFA more and more because there's so many ways agriculture can take you, from engineering to, agronomy and that side to the accounting piece to the HR to sales to, there's just so many different ways. And with technology, it's creating more and more opportunities that there's so many careers that 10 years down the road, like we don't even know what they are yet, but there'll be new careers in 10 years. Right. So it's exciting and a challenge yet to plan for. What do we all need to be looking at as that vision for the future? But I know it definitely, Wendy and I feel very blessed to have had our dad in the business as long as we do still have him mentoring to us. And we certainly hope we can be that for our daughters down the road. So
yeah, like Heidi, I'm so thankful for my dad, my mom, both of our parents, and the opportunities we were given to be raised in the business along with our brothers. We had our challenges over the years, but I'm incredibly proud to be part of this industry, to be part of the success of the Alsum companies. I'm thankful for what our family has done for the community, for what our employees have done. And my goal and desire is to continue the legacy of the family business. My dad was raised on generations of dairy farmers, and so we aren't the only the second generation farming. We're really the fifth generation farming in the United States, and to carry on that legacy of faith and farming and supporting our community. I support my girls in whatever their future career aspirations are. To be determined. They love agriculture. They're involved in 4-H. They love the outdoors. They love having the opportunity to experience different aspects of the business and seeing what we all do. And so I'm thankful, and I hope that we can continue to our daughters and well beyond to future generations.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I know at the beginning of the podcast, you guys talked about being vertically integrated all the way to the consumer. So you all have very visible marketing. So where can people find your potatoes? Because they're easy to spot.
Yes. So we did an uncovery process in 2010 with our customers. And really what came out to them was not our current packaging at the time. It was my dad. And I really felt strongly at the time that consumers did not know where their product was coming from. And so it's ironic. So you have a super humble guy, but I convinced him to go on the front of our packaging, and it's been a win-win. More customers have transitioned to our Alsum label than they have to their private label. So you can find us at an Aldi, a Woodman's, a Meijer, a Piggly Wiggly, a Walmart, Costco. I know there's still a few I'm missing, but we've got a lot of great customers. A lot of them have his face on the bag, and it's across all of our different varieties. So I think it's some pretty good marketing, and that's where our tagline, integrity from field to fork, came out of as well, because my dad operated his business in a way that had the utmost integrity.
And the intent behind the whole marketing and branding campaign is really to connect the consumer to the grower. And so it helps us tell our story on where our potatoes come from and the work that the team puts into growing a quality crop.
And our next iteration will be getting a generational picture on the back of the bag, because I still feel it's important, with my dad kind of being that first generation of potato farmers, to still be on the front, but then definitely to connect consumers with, we've got generations that'll be involved in the business and that are involved.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if people want to learn more about you, if they want to follow along, where do they find you?
So you can go to www.alsum.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram,
LinkedIn.
Okay, awesome. Well, we will absolutely make sure that those connection points are in the show notes for everybody. But as we come to the top of our show, we've got to do our trivia questions. So I know everybody gets nervous and everybody gets excited, especially Ron. So today, not surprising, we are going to be talking about potatoes. So our first question is, how much, it's weird how this has to be written, how much potatoes are grown in the US?
You're looking acres or hundredweight?
Let's do hundredweight.
Oh boy. This one
it's a big one. It's a big one. So don't think tiny numbers. It's big.
I gotta try and do.
I'm embarrassed to admit I was just at the NPC Washington Summit, and they came out with their national potato statistics. I didn't do my studying, Rena, ahead of this.
That's okay. That's all right, because this number was actually really surprising to me as to how big it was.
Over 500 million hundredweight.
That's really close, Heidi. Ron, do you want to take a shot at it?
I was going to be way off, because I was going to say 1 million hundredweights.
Okay. Well, it's
So
actually 420.24 million hundredweight. And for those of you who are listening, 1 hundredweight is equal to 112 pounds of potatoes. So if you take your 112 times 420.24 million, that is how many potatoes are produced in the US per year.
I tried to look at acreage and I did times 450 hundredweight. So that's where I got my number from, but so that's cool.
I mean, that is a lot of potatoes. So
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, but our largest producer of potatoes in the world is actually China. So
Yep.
US is third in terms of overall potato production. So yeah, so that sometimes happens. We have the answer to one of our questions come out in the interview itself, but still that is a tremendous amount of potatoes, which of course most of us enjoy our fair share of them on a yearly basis.
Yes.
So I have a trivia question for our guests then.
All right, go for it, Ron.
I don't know a lot about potatoes, but I do know this fact. So there's different sizes of potatoes, obviously,
Yep.
right? So where do the biggest potatoes grow?
Idaho. Biggest.
They grow in the ground. That's it.
That's a good trick question because I was going to say.
Okay, I want you to know, Ron,
that
I have been around you long enough to know that that is exactly what my brain said, because I have been around you for your speaking engagements where you do those questionnaires, and I'm like, oh, here he comes with one of those.
Here he goes again.
Here he goes. Well, Wendy,
it has been an absolute pleasure to have both of you on. Thanks for taking the time today.
Yes, thank you
so much.
Yeah.
And for all of you who are listening, please check out the show notes to learn more about Heidi and Wendy and their amazing company. Please click the subscribe button and follow along, because we will have more episodes coming soon. And thank you again for joining us on Ag Inspo.
You've been listening to the Ag Inspo Podcast with Rabou and Rena Striegel. Find Ag Inspo on Transition Point Business Advisors or Farm Journal's YouTube channels, as well as anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. For more information about today's guest or the resources referenced today, please see the show notes listed below. Join us next time when we will meet another inspirational leader who has taken those small steps to bring about really big change.